Uh, Welcome, dear listener. If you are comfortable, perhaps you might settle back, close your eyes, and imagine, just for a moment, that we are transported across the centuries to a time when the world moved slowly, deliberately, and with an air of constant vigilance, the world before telegraphs, before railways, before the convenience of instant messages, or the reassuring hum of electric light. Yes, a world where the rise of the sun and the turn of the seasons dictated not only the work we did, but the very rhythm of life itself. And today, we are about to explore one of its more curious and perhaps underappreciated phenomena, the medieval wedding and why. My dear friend, attending one was often less a romantic dalliance and more a survival challenge. Let us begin with the setting. Imagine, if you will, a small village somewhere in northern Europe, perhaps England, perhaps the rolling hills of France, or the dense, whispering forests of Germany. It is early morning. The fog clings to the thatched rooftops like a hesitant guest. The air is damp and slightly pungent, with the mingling smells of smoke from hearth fires and the earthy scent of livestock. Chickens wander clumsily across muddy yards, hens clucking their minor protests at the early stirrings of their human neighbors' children, still half asleep, run barefoot to gather eggs or fetch water from the well, and somewhere, just beyond the visible houses, a church spire rises slowly into the gray sky, stark, yet inviting, its bells soon to mark commencement of the most elaborate, stressful, and often perilous celebration of the season. Weddings you might be inclined to imagine flowing gowns and dashing knights. And indeed, there were gowns and occasionally knights, but the reality, more often, was less a fantasy and more a careful negotiation of survival, a negotiation that involved food, alliances, illness, and occasionally the unpredictable temperament of the local weather. For in those days, a wedding was not merely the joining of two hearts. It was a joining of families, the merging of property, the cementing of alliances, and in some cases, the very survival of a household depended upon its successful execution. You see, in a time before modern medicine, before refrigerators, before roads that allowed for dry, comfortable travel, a simple gathering of more than a dozen people could be a matter of considerable risk. Spoilage of meat, contamination of water, outbreaks of fever, the unpredictable arrival of uninvited guests, and, of course, the ever-present possibility that someone might argue, or worse, draw a blade over perceived insult. So when we speak of a wedding, it is perhaps more accurate to think of a carefully choreographed exercise in hazard management, an event that demanded patience, diplomacy, and a certain tolerance for chaos. Let us consider, for a moment, the preparations weeks, sometimes months, before the day itself. Families will begin the laborious process of readying for the occasion. The bride's mother might be busy sewing, mending, and arranging fine linens. Perhaps she fusses over the young girl's attire, ensuring that every stitch, every ribbon, every carefully plaited lock of hair conforms to what is considered appropriate, desirable, and, dare I say, survivable in the eyes of society. Meanwhile, the groom's household prepares their own contributions. Barrels of ale, baskets of bread, salted meats, and if fortune allows, a modest supply of spice wine. You might think that the challenge lies solely in procurement of goods, but you would be mistaken, for the true test is the coordination of these goods with human beings, unpredictable, easily exhausted, and sometimes quarrelsome. The baker might fall ill, the blacksmith delayed in finishing ceremonial chains. The musicians might quarrel over payment, and all the while, rumors of rival families plotting slight or insults swirl like autumn leaves in the wind. Yes, a wedding was a delicate balancing act, and the slightest misstep could reverberate across the village and occasionally across the region. Imagine, if you will, the journey undertaken by guests, some travel on foot, some by horse or cart, all exposed to the vagaries of the elements, muddy roads, sudden rain, frostbitten mornings, travelers carrying precious gifts of silver, cloth, or cattle, each item a token of respect, or perhaps a subtle assertion of status. One misstep on a slick road, and a horse might stumble, a gift be damaged, tempers flare. And these, my dear listener, are not merely inconveniences. In some villages, such mishaps might result in injury, in the loss of livestock, or even in disputes that linger for generations. The atmosphere. Let us dwell there a moment. Close your eyes, if you will, and imagine the sense of the day. The mingling aromas of fresh bread, roasting meats, smoke from hearth fires, and the faint, sweet scent of flowers. Carefully gathered by the bride's attendants, there is the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clatter of a dropped ladle, the distant bark of a dog, all of this, seemingly mundane, yet all part of the intricate tapestry that is a medieval wedding, a tapestry, woven with threads of joy, obligation, dread, and expectation. And what of the bride and groom? You ask. Ah, the bride, often barely more than a girl, sometimes older, prepared to step into a world governed by rules and rituals that few outside her village could truly comprehend. The groom, perhaps nervous, perhaps eager, clad in garments that are more ceremonial than comfortable, aware of the eyes upon him, the judgment of elders, the quiet scrutiny of neighbors, and the unpredictable behavior of friends and family. Both must navigate the ceremony itself, while also managing the practicalities of sustenance, safety, and social grace. It is, perhaps, instructive to remember that these weddings were rarely private affairs. The village itself was often a participant. Neighbors contributed food, lent utensils, provided entertainment, and in return, they observed, they whispered, they judged. A wedding, therefore, was as much about maintaining social equilibrium as it was about union. A mismanaged feast or an unwell guest could reflect poorly upon a family for years, and, indeed, survival, both literal and social, depended upon the careful orchestration of countless small, mundane, and sometimes perilous details. You, dear listener, might also consider the unpredictability of nature. A sudden rainstorm might turn a carefully swept courtyard into a quagmire. A river might rise, isolating guests or cutting off supply routes. Disease, ever present, lurked in the shadows of crowded halls, in shared drinking vessels, in the close quarters of dancing and dining, and in some cases, a seemingly joyous celebration might end in a quiet sobering of illness, or worse, the tragic loss of livestock, or, rarely, human life. Yet, amidst these risks, there was a certain beauty, the resilience, a stubborn joy in the face of adversity. For all the dangers, the inconvenience, the tension, people gathered, families united. Even if under duress, music was played, dances were danced, meals were shared, alliances were forged, and occasionally, quietly, love found its way into the arrangements, though perhaps not in the way we moderns imagine. And so, dear listener, as you drift gently into the story, imagine yourself not as a passive observer, but as a participant walking the muddy lanes, smelling the smoke of hearth fires, hearing the distant tolling of bells to wear the stakes, the hazards, the small triumphs and failures that make a medieval wedding not merely an event, but an intricate dance of survival, expectation, and human endeavor. In the coming moments, and indeed, in the next segment of our tale, we shall meet some of the individuals who orchestrated, endured, and occasionally floundered amidst these celebrations, families whose names may not be recorded, yet whose experiences are emblematic of a time when the simplest of joys, sharing a meal, offering a blessing, joining two hands, required vigilance, resilience, and perhaps a pinch of luck. So, take a slow, steady breath. Feel the damp earth beneath your imagined feet, the soft chatter of villagers, the hum of distant livestock, the faint strains of a lute being tuned, and let us proceed together, gently, quietly, into the world where weddings were no mere parties, but challenges of survival, where every smile, every bow, every clink of a goblet was part of a careful, delicate orchestration, a dance as old as the village itself. So now you have arrived at the threshold of the ceremony itself. The village is alive, yet not noisy. There's a rhythm here, slow and deliberate, the kind of rhythm that requires attention, patience, and, perhaps, a quiet smile at the small absurdities of life. Let us meet the first characters. On one side, you might imagine the bride's family. The matriarch, a woman seasoned by life's hardships, her hands calloused from years of household toil, her mind ever calculating. Ever alert, she has arranged every detail meticulously, from pattern of the embroidery on the bride's gown to the careful layering of the linens upon the tables. She knows, better than anyone, that even a minor mishap, a spilled bowl of porridge, a guest arriving late, or a loaf of bread gone stale, could echo poorly across the village for weeks, and perhaps she is already rehearsing in her mind the subtle words she must whisper to ensure no quarrel arises, no insult is inadvertently given. The bride herself, imagine her, Perhaps she is barely 16, yet she carries herself with a tentative dignity. The gown, woven from homespun linen or more luxurious imported cloth that the family is fortunate, falls stiffly, awkwardly. Around her, the weight of expectation presses upon her shoulders, not just the expectation of love, for that may be scarce, but the expectation of survival, of poise, of compliance with a network of social rules older than the stones of the village church. She fidgets with her fingers, adjusts a ribbon, glances at the window, and wonders, quietly, secretly, if she might survive the day unscathed, and not just physically, but socially. And then on the other side, we have the groom's household, perhaps a modest family, perhaps a wealthier clan. The father, a man of steady hand and stern brow, inspects the barrels of ale, the salted meats, the carefully stored wine. He consults the family steward, ensuring that all debts are paid, that all gifts are in order, that no neighbor is caused to speak ill. He is a man who understands, keenly, that in these celebrations, honor and survival are intertwined. The groom himself, a young man, perhaps tall, perhaps awkward, clad in ceremonial attire that itches and chafes, he stands nervously, rehearsing bows and greetings, practicing a smile that must seem genuine, and occasionally muttering under his breath, hoping that no one will notice the beads of sweat forming along his brow. He knows that a single misstep, an insult misinterpreted, a cup spilled, a horse stubborn, could mar his reputation, or worse, ignite a small feud that might take years to settle. And then there are the others, the indispensable participants, the priest, robed and solemn, tasked with ensuring that vows are properly spoken, that the union is sanctified, and that all the rituals, some ancient, some peculiar to the local customs, are observed without incident. The priest carries a subtle, quiet authority, and yet even he is vulnerable to the whims of weather, of nervous relatives, of drunken guests who might stumble across the altar. The musicians, too, are crucial. A small ensemble of fiddlers, flutists, and drummers, their tuning and preparation are vital, for without them, the dance cannot commence. The meal loses its rhythm, and the guests, restless, might grow irritable. These musicians, often traveling performers, have their own quirks and temperaments, a misaligned lute string, a misremembered tune, a clash of egos. All of this threatens to unravel the delicate orchestration. The guests, one cannot forget them, a sprawling mix of neighbors, friends, distant cousins, and occasional strangers brought by the winds of chance, each with their own expectations, opinions, and vulnerabilities. Some walk for hours across muddy fields and forest paths. Some ride on carts, their wheels sinking into the soft earth. Some are elderly, some young, some ill. Each arrival adds a complex tapestry, and each arrival carries potential for delight or disaster. And now, imagine the preparation of the feast, long tables in a hall, planks roughly hewn and polished to a dull gleam, bowls of porridge, loaves of bread, salted meats, pies of meat and vegetables, all of it prepared by the hands of the bride's family, the groom's household, and hired help. If fortune allows, the air thick with smoke from hearth fires, the smell of roasting meat mingling with the faint scent of flowers, herbs, and spices. A delightful, dangerous mixture, for in the days before refrigeration, the risk of spoilage is ever present. A carelessly stored pie could sour, a jug of ale could ferment too quickly, and such minor disasters, in the eyes of neighbors, could become monumental. And let us not forget the small but significant threats of illness and accident in crowded halls. The proximity of many bodies, combined with the poor sanitation of time, made disease an invisible guest at every gathering. A mild fever might spread unnoticed. A child might trip and bruise a shin. A servant might carry a jar too full, and thus the careful balance of safety and celebration is maintained precariously, delicately, almost miraculously. You, dear listener, can perhaps imagine yourself slipping quietly among the guests, observing, listening, smelling, noticing the small gestures, the nervous bow of a cousin greeting the bride, the careful arrangement of a platter of food by a trembling hand, the furtive glance of maid ensuring that the bride's dress is not soiled. Every detail matters. Every action ripples through the social fabric, and in this moment, you begin to understand why medieval weddings were considered challenges of survival, not simply because of romance or ceremony, but because every element, food, travel, family, status, illness, weather, pose potential peril. As the hour approaches, You hear the first tolling of the bell, gentle at first, then more insistent, signaling that the ceremony will soon begin. You notice a hush descend over the gathering, a careful quieting of voices, a shifting of weight as guests ready themselves. And even amidst this calm, the underlying tension remains, the tension born not of fear alone, but profound significance of the occasion. For in this village, in this hall, in this moment, survival, honor, and human connection are delicately entwined. And so, as you gently follow this quiet procession, people, each tending to their role, each mindful of risk and responsibility, you begin to understand the medieval wedding not merely as a celebration, but as an intricate exercise in coordination, prudence, and perhaps at times, courage, a subtle, slow, and deliberate negotiation with circumstance, a dance of survival wrapped in ceremony. So here we are, dear listener, at that delicate point in the story where the initial excitement of the preparations begins to mingle with the unpredictable, where human intention meets circumstance, and the smallest ripple can spread across the entire day. Imagine, if you will, the village now fully awake, the bells tolling with regularity, the guests arriving from distant farms and neighboring towns, each traveler bearing gifts, hopes, and occasionally grievances. Consider the journey first. Travel in the medieval era is an adventure in its own right. Roads, if one could call them that, are little more than mud tracks, often deeply rutted by cartwheels and churned by rain. Travelers might walk for hours, even days, balancing baskets on their heads, guiding weary animals, and dodging occasional wayward livestock. Some may be caught in sudden downpours. Imagine the cold rain soaking through thin garments, water pooling in shoes, feet heavy and sore. In the warmth of the village hall, such travelers are welcomed, but their arrival is sometimes shadowed by the threat of illness, fevers, chills, and other maladies ride invisibly with every visitor. And then, the weather, never underestimate its influence. A sudden storm could flood fields, making access treacherous. The hall might become damp and smoky, the straw in the aisles slippery. A simple misstep on wet boards could result in a tumble, a bruised limb, or a cracked platter pie. Even the noble families, cloaked in fine garments, are at the mercy of wind and rain. The young bride's dress could catch on a beam. A delicate ribbon could be torn, and the careful orchestration of the day might be threatened by something as simple as a leaking roof. But it's not only the natural world that complicates matters. Human nature adds its own set of challenges. Guests are not always as calm or compliant as one might hope. The elderly might forget instructions. Children might run between tables, curious and mischievous, occasionally toppling goblets of ale or bread baskets. And then there's the ever-present risk of quarrels. Neighbors with long-standing feuds might find themselves seated side by side, a whispered insult, a misinterpreted glance, or the accidental bump of a shoulder can ignite tempers. And in some cases, a minor scuffle can escalate, drawing the attention of the priest, the family elders, and, in rare but memorable instances, the local constable. Consider also the matter of food and drink. A medieval wedding feast is a marvel of abundance. Roasted meats, pies, bread, porridge, cheese, and perhaps, if the family is wealthy, spiced wine or mead. Yet all of this food is precarious. Meat may spoil before the feast is served. Dairy products may sour in the heat. Bread may be dense and unappetizing. If poorly baked, servants must move with care, balancing heavy platters while avoiding collisions. A spilled jug of ale could soak a guest's cloak, ruin the table linens, and, in the eyes of the observant, signal mismanagement and poor fortune. Indeed, every morsel carries with it both sustenance and potential for calamity. And then there are the subtle complications of social expectation. Dowries must be presented, gifts exchanged, vows carefully recited. The bride's family may have certain expectations of ceremony. The groom's family may harbor ambition for display. The priest is mindful of canonical correctness, while the village eyes are ever alert for lapses in decorum. Even small deviations, a misplaced ring, a mispronounced blessing, or an overlooked protocol, can ripple outward embarrassment, shame, or social tension may follow, lingering for months. Survival, in this sense, is as much about social maneuvering as physical safety. Now, let us glance at the musical accompaniment. An often overlooked hazard. Musicians are employed to maintain atmosphere, to encourage dancing, to soothe nerves, yet they, too, are fallible. A string might snap, a flute might falter, a drummer may miss a beat. In these moments, the rhythm of the day wavers, guests grow restless, children become fidgety, and the careful choreography of service and ceremony threatens to unravel. But, thankfully, experience and quick thinking often avert. Disaster, though not without a few sighs, whispered curses, or gentle rebukes. Consider also the role of the less visible participants, the stewards, the cooks, the stable hands, the maids, and porters. Each contributes quietly, yet crucially, to the day's survival. A misplaced loaf of bread, a delayed jug of ale, a cart stuck in mud. Each small misstep may cause frustration, tension, or delay, and yet with diligence, adaptability, and perhaps a touch of luck, these challenges are managed, often invisibly, and the day continues. And now, let us not forget the occasional visitor with unexpected intent, a traveling noble seeking alliance, a distant relative with a claim to property, a wandering merchant eager for opportunity. Each adds to complexity. Each requires careful attention, hospitality, and negotiation. One cannot simply ignore these visitors, for their displeasure could have consequences far beyond the wedding day itself. Survival, you see, requires diplomacy as much as endurance. Amidst these complications, the everyday realities of life continue. Children must be fed and managed, livestock checked, fires tended, and all the while, the wedding progresses to dance here, a blessing there, the careful passing of platters. One begins to see why a medieval wedding might be called a test of patience, endurance, and perhaps courage, not only for bride and groom, but for everyone present. Yet, in the midst of all this, there is beauty. There is human resilience. There is laughter quietly shared over a minor mishap, a hand extended to steady a tipping chair, a whispered compliment on a gown, a discreet glance to reassure the nervous. It is these small gestures, these subtle acts of care and attentiveness, that allow the celebration to succeed despite the ever-present hazards. Indeed, it is in this delicate balance between risk and care, chaos and order, that the true character of the medieval wedding emerges. So, dear listener, as you follow these gentle movements, imagine yourself slipping quietly through the hall, feeling the warmth of the hearth, hearing the distant chatter, noticing the careful placement of dishes and candles, always aware that survival is woven into the very fabric of this day, that every smile, every gesture, every cautious step is part of a carefully choreographed dance, one where joy and peril coexist, delicately, intimately, inevitably. So now, dear listener, the day has reached its slow, deliberate crescendo. The hall is filled with a soft murmur of anticipation, the flicker of candlelight casting long, gentle shadows upon wooden beams, and the warm glow of hearth fires illuminating faces both eager and anxious. The ceremony is about to begin, and yet, even in these moments of solemnity, one senses the underlying tension that pervades every wedding of this era. For survival is not merely a matter of enduring the day, but of navigating every small challenge it presents. Picture, if you will, the bride standing at the threshold, hands trembling ever so slightly. She is aware, not only the eyes upon her, but the immense weight of expectation. Every gesture, every bow, every measured step carries significance. She steps carefully onto the worn boards of the hall, glancing toward the groom, who stands waiting, perhaps adjusting his tunic nervously, the ceremonial garb stiff and unfamiliar. He bows, and the delicate dance of protocol begins. The priest, robed in quiet authority, intones the opening words, the rhythm of the service slow and deliberate, each phrase measured, each blessing carefully pronounced. The hall listens, not only for spiritual significance, but for any misstep, any deviation that might signal disrespect, poor preparation, or lack of foresight. For in these gatherings, social reputation is as important as ritual correctness, and survival, you see, is often entwined with the ability to navigate these subtleties with grace. And then the exchange of vows, subtle, measured, and fraught with meaning. The words themselves, ancient and prescribed, must be spoken precisely. A mispronunciation, a stutter, a hesitation, all carry weight, for they are observed, judged, and remembered. And yet, even amidst the gravity, there is room for human warmth, a gentle glance, a squeeze a hand, a shared breath, small acts of courage, small gestures that affirm the humanity beneath the ceremony. But the ceremony is only part of the day. The feast follows, a delicate choreography of abundance, long wooden tables, laden with platters of roasted meats, pies, bread, cheeses, and perhaps a touch of spiced wine or mead, stretch across the hall. The servants move quietly but with careful urgency, ensuring that dishes arrive hot, beverages are refilled, and accidents are averted, every spill avoided, every plate delivered on time, is a minor victory in the ongoing test of survival that is this wedding day. Imagine the musicians now. Fiddlers, flutists, drummers, their instruments tuned, their movements practiced, and yet always at risk of faltering. A string might snap, a drum misplayed, a tune remembered incorrectly, and the guests, sensing any lapse in rhythm, might grow restless. Children might wander into the dancing space, adults might whisper about minor mishaps, and the delicate balance of atmosphere teeters. Yet, miraculously, these skilled performers maintain a rhythm that allows the day to proceed with grace. The dances are slow, deliberate steps of ceremonial dances, the gentle sway of couples moving in measured patterns. Every gesture is observed, every misstep potentially embarrassing. Yet in these dances, one glimpses the subtle triumphs of human coordination, of cooperation, of the quiet courage required to navigate social expectations. One misstep, a trip over a hem or a slip on a damp floor, and the laughter may be gentle, forgiving, or pointedly admonishing, but all are absorbed into the rhythm of survival, of ceremony, of human connection. And of course, there are the small crises, the spilled goblet of wine, the toppled chair, the quarrelsome relative, the sudden interruption by a messenger or a traveling noble. Each threatens, briefly, to disrupt the delicate order, and yet each is managed, mitigated, survived, sometimes with patience, sometimes with humor, sometimes with quiet exasperation. The subtle artistry of human endurance is evident in these moments, and one begins to understand why the term survival challenge is apt. The meals, the conversations, the quiet exchanges of advice, counsel, and gossip, each carries potential significance. A whispered suggestion might alter alliances, a compliment might signal approval, a mild rebuke might prevent future error. The day is a network of subtle negotiations. Survival is both literal and social. The food sustains the body. The careful attention sustains reputation, harmony, and, occasionally, the fragile bonds of human affection. And through it all, you, dear listener, can wander quietly in your mind's eye through the hall, noticing the faint flicker of candlelight on polished beams, hearing the low hum of conversation and music, smelling the mingling aromas of roasted meats, fresh bread, and burning hearts, aware of the stakes, the care, the minor crises averted, the laughter shared, the small triumphs of coordination and diplomacy. By now, you begin to see the full tapestry, the interplay of preparation, human foibles, environmental hazards, social expectation, and the quiet courage of every individual present. It is not simply a party. It is a testament to human resilience, to careful observation, to the unspoken understanding that survival requires attention, adaptability, and a touch of patience. And as the evening approaches, the dance is slow, the candles flicker lower, the music softens, and the last of the feast is consumed. The guests, weary but satisfied, begin the journey home, some with minor bruises, some with fleeting embarrassment, some with hearts quietly warmed by small victories and subtle pleasures. And in these moments, the true success of the day becomes apparent. Survival is achieved not without effort, not without attention, not without minor chaos, but achieved nonetheless. Yes, this, dear listener, is the essence of medieval wedding, a delicate orchestration of survival, ritual, social grace, and human endurance, a living demonstration of how our ancestors, in a world both harsh and beautiful, managed to create joy, maintain order, and celebrate life, all while navigating precarious balance between pleasure and peril. So now, dear listener, the day begins to fade, the guests are departed, leaving behind echoes of laughter, clinking dishes, and the faint scent of roasted meats lingering in the air. The hall, once bustling with careful choreography, chatter, and music, is now quiet. Only the occasional murmur of a departing servant or the soft scuff of broom across the floor reminds us that life, however gently, continues. You might imagine the bride and groom now alone in their chamber, weary yet elated, the weight of the day pressing upon them, but softened by the knowledge that, despite every complication, every spilled drink, every anxious glance, they have endured, and more than endured, they have participated in a living tapestry of human experience, woven from ritual, social expectation, joy, and survival. Reflect for a moment on the lessons of the day. Perhaps you notice, as we have, that survival in the medieval world was not merely about avoiding illness, accident, or hunger. It was about navigating the intricate web of relationships, expectations, and obligations. A successful wedding required attentiveness, diplomacy, and a certain grace under pressure, and in this, you see the quiet genius of our ancestors, how they turned potential chaos into celebration, peril into ritual and human, fragility into endurance. And the legacy, it lingers in the subtle echoes of human culture, in the careful observances, the emphasis on family and community, the recognition that life's most joyous moments are also its most precarious. Even today, centuries later, we can glimpse the patterns they followed, the lessons they imparted, and we can admire quietly the resilience required to navigate such days with dignity, humor, and grace. You, dear listener, might now settle further into your chair. Imagine a hall emptied, the fires dying low, the moonlight casting silver shadows upon the thatched roofs, the village quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of night wind through trees. The echoes of human endeavor, laughter, and survival linger faintly in the air, a reminder that even in the simplest of ceremonies, there is complexity, courage, and subtle beauty. And so, as you let your mind wander gently through this medieval landscape, consider the quiet triumphs of those who came before, the careful hands that arranged food, the watchful eyes that guided travelers, the steady feet that navigated slippery boards, the tender hearts that endured the pressures of expectation, all of them participants in a dance that was at once social, ceremonial, and deeply human. Perhaps you notice, as you reflect, that the challenges of these weddings were never solely about danger or misfortune. They were about connection, about bringing people together, about negotiating the fragile balance between joy and risk, expectation and improvisation, tradition and adaptability. And in this, you might find a subtle comfort, for though the world has changed, the essence of human experience, the striving for harmony, the careful management of risk, the celebration of union, remains quietly within us all. And so, dear listener, let us linger a moment longer in the soft silver glow of memory, in the warmth of hearth fires now extinguished, in the gentle understanding that human life, even in its most ceremonious moments, has always been a delicate balance, a quiet negotiation with circumstance, a testament to endurance, ingenuity, and, yes, even joy. Take a slow, deep breath, feel the soft weight of the story settling gently around you. Let the echoes of the hall, the faint scent, the quiet triumphs, the resilience and the laughter, all settle into your imagination, and know that you have, in your mind's eye, attended not merely a wedding, but a celebration of human perseverance, a gentle reminder that even amidst peril, there is beauty, grace, and enduring connection. And with that, let us close our eyes and drift softly into the quiet night, leaving behind the flickering candles, the gentle music, the careful steps of dancers, and the enduring human spirit that guided them through a day both perilous and profoundly alive.